Good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's Xtalks webinar. At this point, I'd like to thank Arriello, who developed the content for this presentation. Arriello has been a leading provider of risk management and compliance services to the life sciences sector since 2008. These include market consultancy, global regulatory affairs strategy and implementation, full and local pharmacovigilance solutions, clinical drug safety, and quality and compliance auditing and systems. Their brief is simple: to make the process from development to market faster, better, and smarter. They are headquartered in Ireland and currently operating in 143 countries with the ability to expand as required. With their in-house expertise, vendor network, ISO 9001 certification, years of experience, and satisfied clients, you can be confident in their ability to deliver as a trusted partner. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's event. Dr. John Price is an executive physician with deep experience gained from over 25 years working across a breadth of regulatory affairs and pharmacovigilance worldwide. He has created and led high-functioning global departments for pharmacovigilance, regulatory and clinical operations, global departments, medical writing and drug development, and held senior roles in the UK Medicines Control Agency, now the MHRA, as well as Pfizer, J&J, Alexion Pharmaceuticals, and in academia. Dr. Price has participated directly in pharmacovigilance inspections in the US and Europe, building globally compliant drug safety systems and delivering risk management plans to meet regulatory expectations worldwide. And so now, without further ado, I'd like to hand the presentation over to our speaker, Dr. John Price. You may begin when you're ready.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. Today's presentation is about how we, who are working in pharmacovigilance, and in particular working with the problems that we often encounter in case intake, can turn the promised next generation of technology into the now generation. How do we bring it to reality? Because there has been much interest and indeed hype about automating case intake in recent years. Interest from companies and hype from many of the vendors who supply our solutions. So the question that arises is, where are we in terms of implementing potentially helpful solutions, and if we are as far along the path as we maybe should be? So let me just move on to the next page. Ryan has already introduced me. Thank you very much for that introduction. I've been working most recently with a number of companies in the US and Europe who are thinking about, or indeed embarking on, automated case intake, by which I'm referring to the process of receiving safety information on individual case safety reports from reporters, which really begins the whole process of pharmacovigilance that we're all interested in. So one of the frustrations I do have, and I'll put it out there right now, with automation in PV generally, is that the potential seems to be talked up significantly by a number of the technology providers, and the reality is somewhat hard, or somewhat different. It is sometimes difficult to implement solutions out of the box, although when you talk to some of the vendors in this space, you would believe that things are kind of plug and play. So there are a lot of very interested companies in this, but struggling when it comes to actually working on automating case intake. And maybe there are, that struggle is a disincentive, but there's no doubt, at least in my mind, that we need to be embarking on this journey. I'm sure that we know collectively the pressures upon the industry to process ever increasing numbers of cases. Large pharmaceutical companies can be handling in excess of 1 million cases a year. Even mid-sized companies could be handling hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of cases of safety information each year. And we know the regulators' databases contain tens of millions of cases. So the volume, and that volume is increasing year on year. So we know that the challenge is there ahead of us to be able to simply manage the volume of information. And the sources of data increase as well as we look at new potential sources from electronic health records and other such sources which maybe we didn't have 10, 15 years ago. A question that arises is, where are we on this path? I think we have had our expectations somewhat inflated by the hype. I hope that the path of disillusionment is not too deep for those who have not yet started looking at potential solutions. But as I say, I do think that we need to be moving along this curve to a future state which will benefit us and therefore patients, because we are using a lot of resource simply processing cases in a manual fashion in the present day. And that can be consuming 60 or 70% of our budget, simply moving data from place to place. So, but what do we mean when we're talking about this new technology? Easy to say, how do we automate case processing? But what do we mean? And a lot of jargon is thrown around. And having spoken to many people involved in this area, I realized that we don't all understand the terminology, and we sometimes use the terms to mean different things. And we have a number of terms showing on the slide here, which you may be familiar with and come across. And a question I have is, when we use these terms, do we all know exactly what we mean? And the last bullet on the slide, a little bit provocatively there, is this all about replacing jobs? And I would suggest that it is not about replacing the human element, it's about repurposing the human element so that the humans involved in pharmacovigilance are adding more value rather than simply moving data points around, in particular into a database. So we would offer some potential definitions of some of these terms, though, at a most basic, although still quite sophisticated level of automation. We have robotic process automation. This is non-cognitive. And really here, a machine is simply doing some tasks that would otherwise be done by a human being. And then, a step up from that might be intelligent automation, where a system is offering the user choices according to the computer's analysis of different data presented to it. This makes the user's job easier, and it makes their performance more consistent. It is still largely algorithmic. It appears intelligent, but it's clever programming, slick programming designed to provide a very good user experience. And then moving on to the most sophisticated level, we have our artificial intelligence. We have cognitive processing, where again, there is still a learning element by the computer, but it can also self-learn. like a human being, like a child. They learn from their experiences, and they learn how to assimilate and process that information, depending on feedback from results of processing that information in a particular way. So in terms of PV, probably it's the previous two slides, the robotic process automation and intelligent automation, which are perhaps most easy to understand and apply. I think when it comes to analysis of information, that's where we have to get into a more cognitive process. And this would be something like, if we're thinking of case processing, it would be the medical review stage where causality needs to be assessed. And I think that's going to be some way off as we apply these new technologies. But just again, to help think a little bit more about what is feasible, what is realistic, if we step away from the pharmacovigilance area for a moment and think of an example here, other industries have embraced automation and application of these technologies. Indeed, many of us trust our finances to computerized automated processes. Here, in the US, we're familiar with, if you receive a check, you can deposit it in your bank account by taking a photograph of it using your smartphone and uploading it to your account, where that check is then read using optical character recognition. It's processed through a computerized system, which brings many advantages. There's time saving. You don't have to go to the bank, particularly in this era of risk of COVID. You don't even have to venture outside the house to actually deposit and manage your account. And it's fast and less error prone. It's very convenient. And there are other technologies that you may be very familiar with, such as voice interaction, phone chatbots. Some of us love to hate these, but they can be very useful. For example, when you're renewing a prescription from your pharmacy, you can dial it in and you speak to the computer and you get your prescription filled. Or some of you may have opened your laptop this morning and signed on through facial recognition, or it's the same with your cell phone. Those are examples of the application of artificial intelligence and automation. Or you may have asked Alexa or Siri or Google what the weather was going to be today. Those are all the technologies that we're talking about. So the question that arises is, when other industries have, pushed ahead with the application of these technologies, why not pharmacovigilance? So I'm just going to pause there for a moment and invite Ryan to pose a question to you.
Yes, so we have a poll question for audience members to interact with right now in real time. It's appearing on your screen, and you can click and vote on this question by clicking on any of the answers. The question we have for you is, do you use any kind of data structuring application that is visual, auditory, or both in your personal or professional life? Your answer options are simply a yes or a no. We appreciate you taking the time to consider this question and submit a response. The question, of course, being, do you use any kind of data structuring application that is visual, auditory, or both in your personal or professional life? It looks like most of you have submitted your vote already, so thank you very much for your participation. Let's take a look at those results. It looks like 71% have said yes and 29 coming in for no. So again, thank you very much for your participation. John, it's back to you.
Well, thank you for that. So I think that I'm not surprised by that. It's a pretty high proportion. It would be interesting to know the reasons why the 29% who are not using such technology in their professional life, why you're not, because that's pertinent perhaps to the topic here. Why are we not further along the line when it comes to pharmacovigilance? What are the barriers? What's stopping us? So traditional case intake is a multi-step activity. A reporter fills in a form and they send it by email. They may have to scan it onto their computer with a printer scanner and send it by an email to the receiver at the company or a call center, wherever it is, who extracts the information. They open the attachment, they extract the information, and they type it into a database manually. And as I've already alluded to, this is a laborious, expensive, it's an error-prone exercise. There's layers of quality control that are needed to prevent the wrong information being transcribed. And really, this adds little to no added value about the safety of a product as an exercise in itself. And sometimes, the recipient of that information has to decipher handwriting, and it's an added complication for this whole process. But if we think of an alternative, why not have a simple digital interface for the reporter who can respond to a familiar formatting of questions, perhaps in drop-down menus, or questions with prompts that prompt a line of questioning that enables them to easily fill in the useful information. And an application that can turn structured data, therefore turn unstructured data into structured data, and then automatically capture certain information such as the date and the place and so on, because of where the information and when the information is being filled in. And then an application that can easily handle text and numbers and attachments. And then at the press of a button, that can be then sent to the recipient and automatically populate screens at the recipient so that there isn't this manual extraction of information. So this is really what we're talking about here. How do we get to that future state? So that's to lay the sort of foundation, the background to the presentation and the discussion today. So when we were interested in this, we thought, well, why don't we do a survey and we'll ask some people in pharmacovigilance, where we're at across the industry. And this is a moderately sized, decent sized survey of 200 individuals in the UK and the US who are professionals working in pharmaceutical companies. It was conducted recently in the summer, the end of June. And the representation, the recipients of these pretty broad representation of our industry, reflecting probably the composition of our industry. A little over a third at large pharma, just under a quarter at small or medium pharma, and then the rest distributed across very small companies and other types of companies. So we asked them a number of questions about automation, and just by way of seeing whether this audience agrees with the respondents, we're going to again ask one of the questions up front before we show what we got from the 200 professionals in the survey. Over to you, Ryan.
Yes, so our next poll question asks, do you currently use or plan to use PV automation for adverse reaction reporting, case intake, within the next year? Again, it's a yes or no question. We appreciate your participation. I believe John will be speaking further on this in a moment. The question again is, do you currently use or plan to use PV automation for adverse reaction reporting within the next year? Give you a few more seconds to think about this and submit your answer. And it actually looks like most of you have voted now, so let's go ahead and take a look at those results. 73% coming in for yes, and 27% coming in for no. Thank you very much, and it's back to you, John.
Thank you very much. So 73%, almost 3/4 of this audience are either implementing or have implemented. And let's take a look at what we had from the survey in June. Here we've split the results on the slide by UK and USA. So the average across the two countries is about 20%. 1 in 5 had already at this time said that they had implemented some degree of automation. And then you can see how they responded to the question that we posed them, slightly different to the question that we posed you just a moment ago. But we split it into time frames. But when you add up the numbers, there are only 2 to 3% of the respondents who are not planning to adopt some kind of automation in the next 12 months. My personal concern about that is this realistic? To go from 20% to almost 100% in the space of 12 months. And it may belie perhaps a lack of understanding of the complexity of implementing some automated technology. On the other hand, there may be some automated technology that is very easy to implement. So it is interesting, very interesting, that there is a significant interest in automating case intake in our industry. So, also interesting, we found, because we also asked about application of automated technology for other areas that we use in pharmacovigilance. And so there's on this slide we have the 20% across both countries at the top here, and significantly more application of automation in other areas that we're familiar with, shown down the left: literature screening, regulatory intelligence, document compilation, medical information, and so on. So again, a takeaway from this is that, yes, the case intake area is lagging, and interesting to wonder why that is. What is the reason why adverse reaction reporting has not seemingly been as amenable to these technologies as other areas in pharmacovigilance. So moving on. Yeah. So we did ask what were the perceived barriers to automation for case intake, and the results are shown on the slide. So the top 3 of these are all IT related, which we found fairly interesting, but not necessarily intuitive. And we'll perhaps come back to that. Cost figures there, but not as high as one might think it could, and that's a good sign, I think, because while there is an investment cost, there should be a fairly quick return on that investment, as the need for manual processing of information goes down. You see the other perceived barriers implementations here, including, fear of human replacement. Perhaps it is real, and fear of this technology is perhaps a factor that would be interesting to discuss later. But the IT barriers are interesting because, of course, we're talking about IT solutions, and perhaps there's some lack of understanding of the whole, what we're trying to do here, and whether we have the right capabilities within our companies to actually effectively implement these solutions in a way that gives us confidence that they're going to perform the tasks that humans would otherwise be performing, and perform them as well. And again, I would argue that computers can be more reliable than humans at the tasks that we're discussing. They can be more consistent and less error prone. So at this point, we would also, again, have another poll question for the audience. Ryan?
Yes, so our next poll question, that should be appearing on everyone's screen right now, where you can click on either of the two answers and then click submit, is do you agree with the survey findings that IT capability presents the biggest hurdle to introducing automation to PV? Your answer options are a yes or a no. Give you a few seconds to submit your answer. You're all getting much faster at this. Thank you very much. It looks like most of you have voted, so let's take a look at the results. 64% coming in for yes, and then 36% coming in for no. Again, thank you for your participation. John, take it away.
Thank you. So some validation there of these findings, a general agreement that IT does present a barrier. And again, it could be a topic of discussion at the end. What exactly is it about our IT capabilities that is that barrier? Because I think, if we have a common interest in moving this technology forward, and that we do believe in the benefits, then how do we overcome those barriers? So we also asked about the perceived benefits. What are the advantages of automating case intake? And these shown on the slide are how those 200 respondents assess the benefits and the advantages. So improved compliance was at the top. Higher reporting volume, which suggests that it's perceived that we will actually encourage reporting through using these technologies, is high as well. And the speed of our actions and our activities being enhanced is up there as well. If efficiency maybe not appearing at the top is of interest, I would personally think that is, the major benefit. I'll be provocative and say the major benefit, because an objective here is to be able to repurpose our human resource into activities that we can't have a computer do. And we do that by reducing the effort that we're currently using on processing information, and recycle that resource into other areas that, such as signal detection, risk management, and so on, that are not not as well resourced as perhaps they need to be. Data quality was intriguing, that it was not also perceived as one of the top advantages, given the effort that we tend to expend in our industry in assuring that quality. not many days or weeks go by when we're not looking at data that has been processed incorrectly, and missed in the QC process, and then correcting it. And the ability to avoid that effort, I would think, would be a significant advantage of this technology. So I think there's only one more slide on the results of the survey, and I think before showing you that, I think I wanted again to ask a poll question.
Yep.
Ryan?
So we've got one more that we'd appreciate the audience to participate in right now. That question is, to what extent do you think your organization will be disadvantaged if you do not adopt case intake automation? Your answer options are not at all, a little, or a lot. The question again is, to what extent do you think your organization will be disadvantaged if you do not adopt case intake automation? I'll give you a few more seconds to submit an answer. We appreciate everyone's participation today. Looks like most of you have voted. Let's take a look at our results. 57% coming in for a little, 36% saying a lot, and 7% for not at all. Interesting results. Thank you again. John, it's back to you.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for those responses. I detect a little difference from the results that we got when we did the survey, which I'm showing on the slide here. I think there was a skew in our mini poll just a few minutes ago towards, that there is a disadvantage of not adopting this technology. When I saw the results from our survey in the summer, which is shown here, I mean, the predominant answer was not very disadvantaged. I mean, I granted that this is a very subjective survey, but put together with the answers either side of that, the vast majority, my feeling was it looked somewhat ambivalent, that that companies were fairly ambivalent about whether they really needed to adopt automation, which is curious because it's not wholly consistent with the benefits that we saw perceived a moment ago, and also not wholly consistent with a significant drive towards automation that was on, a slide 3 slides ago, where almost 100% of the respondents said they either have automated or are in the process or plan to automate within the next 12 months. One wonders what the driver is within the company for achieving that, if there isn't really much perceived advantage of doing so. And perhaps, the survey answers are always open to interpretation, and we don't know exactly what was in the minds of every one of the 200 respondents when they answered this question. But overall, it didn't show, a sense, it didn't reveal a sense, of significant perception of significant benefit of going down the route to automation. So we put all this together and think for a minute. There's a lot of information that we had from the survey, and trying to draw it all together and summarize, where in this, if we've got almost 100% of the industry planning to automate in a short space of time, we have a limited number of products available from the IT companies and a limited number of personnel to help implement who's going to get there first? Who are going to be the winners? Who are going to be the losers if this was a race? And I would suggest that, the IT problems that we spoke about a minute ago as barriers are less of a problem for big pharma companies who have large IT departments and can be very, influential with the vendors and or even develop their own in-house systems. And so they probably are just going to be able to implement, without, interference, if I put it that way, from the environment that we're operating in. They have their own problems, vast amounts of data and complex data sources and large numbers of data sources are all factors here that make it harder to implement a solution than perhaps for a smaller company where, because they're smaller, they have less volume, the solutions are simpler, easier to implement, but they may lack the in-house resource to implement the solution effectively. So I've come to the end of the presentation. The objective was to show you the survey results and try to put that in context, put some interpretation into what we're seeing, what we saw when we did the survey, and put it all in context of what I think and what the survey tells us is that there is enthusiasm and an energy and a drive to automate, but we aren't making as much progress as perhaps we could, and it would be interesting to explore that in the discussion. I will make a shout out to a product that Arriello makes in this space. It is a simple tool that it's an app that can be uploaded onto your smartphone and which enables the reporting of adverse events in a really simple way. It's also speech enabled, so it can be both typed or speech. So spoken, the information can be spoken to it. And I think it's an example of the kind of technology that we need to be thinking about to address the problems that we have with case intake, and it is a potential solution. This is the kind of solution that we need to be thinking about. If you want more information on it, the website is shown there. So I'm going to close there and thank Ryan and thank the audience for joining and listening and hopefully joining in discussion. And I'm going to hand it back, I think, to Ryan.
Yes, well, and thank you very much for that insightful presentation. I'd like to invite our audience to continue sending their questions or comments right now with the questions window for this Q&A portion of the webinar. I've already received some questions, though, so we'll get started with those. Our very first question simply asks, John, what are the most surprising results in the survey to you?
Yeah, I think there were a number of surprises, and I hope that that those have come out during the presentation. The main one being this disconnect, I think, between the number of respondents who claim to be about to implement case automation and the sense that there isn't perhaps as much perceived benefit or advantage of actually automating. And I think that merits further exploration. It'd be interesting to get the audience's thoughts on that as well. It may be a misinterpretation of the information in the survey, but it stood out as something of interest to me. Also because having worked with some companies on some solutions, a 1-year time frame for implementing is ambitious. It's not undoable. It's not infeasible. It is, depending on what solution we're talking about. And that made me wonder whether whether the respondents were thinking of, 100% full-blown automated case intake, which means no human touch between a report being made by a reporter and that report appearing in the database, or whether it was perhaps automation of some elements of that path.
Excellent, thank you very much. Our next question would like to know, when implementing these technologies, what issues have you encountered, or what challenges do you foresee?
Well, so I alluded a moment ago, certainly challenges that relate to the complexity of the existing system at the company. And large companies have more complexity than small companies. So to give an example of what I'm talking about there, just as an example, some technologies rely, for example, on optical character recognition, or OCR, to read a form. And you have to teach the machine each form because it has to recognize the information that it's reading as the information it was expecting to receive. So the more forms that you use, the more teaching of the machine there needs to be of the computer. The computer has to be taught the difference between different forms and so on. So the complexity of the existing system is a factor that that plays into the ease of implementation. Other challenges, I would say, perhaps more culturally, concern that one doesn't really know what is in the black box. There is this box that is now going to process cases, whereas previously we could see the information because we had pairs of eyes on it. And however much we trusted the humans to process the information correctly and accurately, at least we knew that somebody was looking at the information. Now there's this perception that things are happening in a black box, and this concern that we don't really know what's going on in there. And I think that's not a real problem, but I think I think we're getting over that as companies demonstrate their technology, and you can actually see and understand, oh, so that's what it's doing. It's not quite as mystical as we thought it might be. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we have notions of what does that actually mean. And I think the fear factor that mentioned earlier, the fear not necessarily of replacing humans, but the fear of the technology, more like what is this technology going to do? Is it really under our control? The computer HAL in Stanley Kubrick's film 2001: A Space Odyssey, which won't let the astronaut Dave back into the spacecraft because the computer fears that Dave is going to turn it off. That kind of fear. What is this technology actually doing to our system? I don't think that's really there when companies begin to understand the technology. Those are just some of the issues that have kind of come across and worked through.
Excellent, thank you very much. Our next question would like to know if you could share your thoughts on the validation of these technologies.
Well, that's a very, very interesting question. And actually, I could have mentioned that in response, validation in response to the previous question. I probably should have, because it does come up in discussions around automating case intake. And I'm not really sure. I mean, there's a very strong view that everything needs to be validated. I mean, I think validation is really, confirmation that what went in is the same as what came out, of a computer system. And there are other ways. The good old-fashioned way of doing that is to do quality control. And the information is the same in the system as was put into the system. And so there are a number of ways of doing that checking. And you can have the reporter check that what they've entered into the form or into the system is what they intended to put into the system before they press the send button. And so we can rely on the reporter for some of this. And then, I talked about repurposing the resource in the pharmacovigilance case processing process. So rather than having those many data entry personnel manually entering data, you need them to check that the information has been correctly entered by the computer. And that is an efficiency, because in the time that it takes one person to data enter information on one case, that person could perhaps check 5 or 6 or even more cases that have been processed by the computer. So we get an economy there. So I think validation is certainly a topic that merits further discussion amongst all the stakeholders as to what does it really mean when it comes to this technology.
Thank you very much for that answer. Our next question would like to know, what degree of efficiencies do you think companies should expect to achieve by automating case intake? The main question being, is it worth the investment?
Well, thanks. I am definitely a convert. I think that the efficiencies are both tangible and intangible. We've alluded to the potential for enhanced compliance and enhanced quality. Sometimes those are things we don't necessarily measure very well when in industry, when we're measuring the productivity of our human resources in processing cases, how the effort that goes into correcting mistakes or accelerating the processing of a case because it's coming up to a deadline, or remediating a missed case. A missed deadline, in a late report. We don't always measure those effectively. I have seen values of efficiency from some of the companies who are making potential solutions in this space. I've seen numbers, north of 50% efficiency. I'm being conservative there. I've seen, 70, 80% potential efficiency. I think getting to a true number is hard because, as I say, I'm not sure that we have a great handle on exactly what our current resource burn is for case processing, and it probably varies from company to company. And companies do the activities in slightly different ways. So, I would think, I wouldn't go as far as to say, well, at the end of the day, the efficiency is 100% because effectively it's completely automated. You know, it's there's nothing to be done. Therefore, you know, we've got 100% efficiency. But I think, you know, numbers of, you know, 75, 80%, even higher are realistic.
All right, well, thank you very much for that answer and for all of the answers. However, we have reached the end of the question and answer portion of the webinar for today. If we couldn't attend to your questions, the team at Arriello may follow up with you, or if you have further questions, you can visit the website that's up on your screen. I want to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen as you exit, and your participation is appreciated, as it will help us to improve our webinars. Now, I'm about to send you a link in the chat box, and with this link, you'll be able to view a recording of this archive at this website, and you can share this link with your colleagues when they register for the recording there as well. So I encourage you to do that. Now, please join us in thanking our speakers, Dr. John Price. We hope that you found the webinar informative. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for coming.